Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the brouhaha continues between Democrats who are asking why the Attorney General of the state is not indicting Republicans. I think that's the way to put it. And then we have our popular financial literacy update. The Secretary of Banking will join us for a discussion of, guess what, financial matters. All that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, joining me as often is the case are two of the state's top reporters. John Micek, he's sitting across from me. He's with the Allentown Morning Call. He has a blog called Capital Ideas. See, I got that right. And Brad Bumsted with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. He's a journalist. He's a columnist. You guys do it all. I mean, I can get any information I need. I just call you on the phone, right? Instead of you calling me. All right, Brad, I want to start with you. Press Club earlier in the week, that's this Monday morning monthly luncheon. Do I got that right so far? Well, you tell me, what's the Press Club about?
Pennsylvania Press Club is an association, and the reporters, PR people, they hold a monthly gig, and someone comes in to speak, usually a prominent Politico, and this week it was Todd Ichus, the House Majority Leader.
And now, okay, he pretty much said on the record, in front of all you, that the Attorney General should step down while he's running for election as governor in the course of doing this investigation, particularly into the legislature. Is that about sums that up?
I think it does, but Mr. Ichus would say, you know, that he did not call for him to step down. He just raised the issue. He was trying to have it both ways. He wanted to bring it up and say, look, the Virginia Attorney General stepped down when he was running for governor, and that's something you could look to. But he says, I'm not saying what Mr. Corbett should do. That's up to him.
Yeah, but we've had attorney generals elected.
No one was clamoring for Mike Fisher to quit in 2002 when he was running against Ed Rendell. It's pretty cravenly political. I mean, let's call it what it is here. You know, Mr. Ichus's caucus is getting investigated left, right, and sideways by Mr. Corbett's office, and Mr. Corbett's an announced candidate for governor. And I'm sure they'd rather run against somebody else who's now building himself a reputation for cleaning out Harrisburg.
And they also have just within the last 2 weeks, additional indictments against, or I should say, a presentment against Representative Vion for this economic development company with the acronym BIG, B-I-G, where he's been charged with, you know, the usual laundering of money and public corruption. So do you think that the timing of the grand jury presentment and Representative, go ahead.
I'm sure Democrats are feeling a touch on the embattled side these days. Mr. Corbett's office has been focusing like a laser on them for the better part of 18 or 24 months.
Yeah, but Brad, you've written stories about this, and there have been other colleagues, I think, John, you have too, that the Attorney General, for the longest period of time now, has been looking into the House Republican caucus. I mean, people have, you know, I know when they testify it's all supposed to be secret, but where does that story go?
Well, it's interesting because Vion's attorney, Joel Sansone, said that this is a partisan investigation by a Republican Attorney General, and he said he's not even investigating Republicans. Well, we know that's not true because I've talked to people, Republicans, who have been before the grand jury. It is true that he hasn't, you know, charged any Republicans. But Mr. Corbett says he's still investigating. He says no one criticized the federal authorities for how long it took to indict Vince Fumo. This takes time, and
the problem with Mr. Corbett is he's walking a very delicate, very, very delicate line. It may well be true that the investigation will unfold as the investigation unfolds, but he's also an announced candidate for governor and has been, you know, and prior to this was well known to be eyeing the governor's office. Unfortunately, you can't get rid of that veneer of politics from this. So he has to balance the political risk of that with not, you know, pursuing a witch hunt kind of prosecution.
Now, but the point is, he has said on the record, in fact, he said on this show when I asked him, I think it was late last summer or early fall, that there will be additional indictments. Now, everyone, maybe at the moment, he was thinking of Mike Vion, but I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. In fact, I think charges against Mr. Vian and a former aide were sort of a sidetrack from this whole thing. I don't really think that was round two. It was just something that he felt he needed to do because these allegations were out there. Clearly, there was some misuse of big. Whether Mr. Vian committed a crime or not is another question. But I think that Mr. Corbett is going to charge some Republicans before this is all over. Exactly how high that goes or whether they're sitting members remains to be seen. But you know, all of this hasn't unfolded. There's going to be another round, probably not too long after Easter, I would guess.
Right. So, but to end this, and then we'll go to break, and we'll come back and talk a little bit about this running battle between Governor Rendell and the Republicans over who. I don't think who controls this stimulus. Well, there is a battle over that, and there's also a battle over sort of oversight. Who will? How transparent is it? In addition to how the money is spent. But before I do, John, I want to ask you one additional question. How much do you think that all of this doesn't seem to be interfering? Now, you cover the legislature day in and day out. Legislature is functioning, notwithstanding the fact that the Attorney General has kind of this Damocles sword hanging over a lot of legislators, perhaps, and staff people, perhaps.
It doesn't seem to have interfered with the lack of work that they've been doing over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
You know, the legislature's in, they're passing bills, they're moving paper around.
Right.
You know, it's got to be an annoying distraction, but it hasn't brought the wheels of government to a halt.
All right, when we come back, government's stimulus, $16 billion in the state. Who should control it? Who should monitor it? That and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're doing a legislative update on the big items that are before the legislature. But Brad, you were making the point, typically they don't do much, the legislature. A lot of it is done in May and June. But even by sort of old standards, this doesn't seem to be the most productive session, does it?
No, and even going back to last fall. And I think the investigation by the Attorney General has thrown them off track. Even if it's not a day-to-day concern, it's a distraction, and it affects you know, some of the leaders.
And the Senate Republicans, go ahead.
I mean, there's one of the things that with the economy being what it is, there is an absence of big ideas out there. There is the Democrats, and we're talking about this off camera, the Democrats' fifth iteration of health care reform. Right. The Senate's taking another run at sort of bigger reform measures that they tried last time. But, I mean, apart from that, you know, the debate so far is focused on how to spend the stimulus money from Washington, and beyond that, we'll get to the budget. So I think the investigation has been a distraction, but it's not like there's been a major agenda for anybody to try to push through either.
Yeah, let's talk about another component of this. We had seen this in the Senator Fumo case where there was a nonprofit. We see it with former Representative Vian where there was a nonprofit. Legislators, and I think Representative Purcell has one, correct me if I'm wrong, legislators set up these nonprofits. They then funnel into them millions of dollars in state money. They get to control the boards because they pretty much control who's on the board if they're not on the board. And then that leads to all kind of trouble. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, it's really a problem. And even though it may be a small number of cases of legislators who have nonprofits, the idea that you would be responsible for getting state money, in Big's case, Vian's, $10 million in grants.
It's not a little bit of
giving
money.
It to a nonprofit, and almost unilaterally, in his case, being able to decide how to spend the money. Again, separate from his guilt or innocence on the criminal charges, it's a bad process to allow that to happen. In Senator Fumo's case, he wasn't on the board, but he controlled the board.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, technically, if you're controlling the board and you're pretty much I mean,
it's bizarre. It's these little legislative, like fiefdoms within legislative districts where they're sitting there like feudal lords doling out favors and cash to their constituents. It's this government within a government that's sort of been brought to light.
Their argument to the contrary, gentlemen, is that they know their districts best, that they know them better and where the money should be spent, so why should somebody else decide how the money is spent? I mean, that's the argument that they make. And, you know, Representative Sterla from Lancaster County has been on this program many times, has one of them. Now, no allegations that I know of that did anything wrong. I want to make that very clear. We're not suggesting that. He says, I know where the money should go better than anybody else.
Well, that's fine, and maybe he does, but he also is able to get through the regular process, whams, walking around money for his district that can be spent pretty much anywhere he wants where there's a need. I think all this does with the nonprofits is adds another layer that enables them to get more money.
The issue is one of oversight. There's the wham process, which is lousy to begin with, but at least there's bureaucratic channels that money has to go through before it can be doled out. You give somebody a pot of money, and I don't care how honest they are, you are opening the potential for abuse.
The other point is about there's no established criteria for spending the money. A lot of federal programs and state programs have a set of reasonably objective criteria that you have to meet. In this case, I guess there's virtually none, right? With these, go ahead.
Well, there are criteria, but what we're seeing, based on the presentment against Vion and in records from the Department of Community and Economic Development, was that the department sort of turned its head at big complying with these various regulations. They granted them extension after extension before they would close out grants, and gave them more money before one grant was closed out. They'd get more money, and then more. And somebody wasn't riding herd.
All right, before we leave that, there is a proposal, I guess, that Senator Dominic, help me out, Pileggi is making that will disallow legislators from participating in these nonprofit corporations.
Step in the right direction, but it doesn't prevent your wife, for instance, from running a nonprofit.
And it says, and I think the proposal, John, says substantial, or there's a qualifier in there so that you could get money from somewhere else, but you could still get a large amount of state money. So, go ahead.
Well, I mean, as Brad said, it's a step in the right direction, but I mean, the outright banning of these things is probably
all right, before I let you go, oversight of the federal stimulus, $16 to $22 billion will come into the state. Tell us what Governor Rendell has done, appointed someone to be the chief financial officer. Get into that.
First of all, he's appointed an overall commission to account for the money, and that includes state lawmakers, congressional representatives, business and labor leaders. And this is to account for approximately $10 billion of the $16 billion. The remainder of that is what goes for tax breaks. This is what would go to governments, to state and local governments. And this week he appointed Ron Naples, a former Philadelphia CEO, a West Point graduate, to be the chief accountability officer and the head of the governor's team, dealing with accountability. And Mr. Naples is going to be paid $120,000 a year out of federal stimulus money to help account for the money.
All right, guys, I want to thanks, as always, for coming in. All right, financial literacy update. The Secretary of Banking is here. We're going to find out, well, what is the health of the financial institutions in the state following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, it's Financial Literacy Update, and as always, when we have Financial Literacy Update, that guy right there, Michael Wishnow, from the now, come on, the Pennsylvania Credit
Union Association.
See, now I can get that out. Even I know that. And of course, Steve Kaplan. He is the. What are you doing?
I'm the Secretary of Banking for Pennsylvania.
Secretary of Banking. Yeah, we have a little fun here this morning, Mr. Secretary. Now, into a more serious matter. What can we say, what can you tell us about the health of Pennsylvania's financial institutions? Mike and I have talked a lot about credit unions and what they do over the course of many years. Given all that's going on, credit formation, give us an overview.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question just that way, because we've been inundated in the press with the bad news over the last couple of years, what's going on globally, nationally, with the biggest financial institutions. Pennsylvania financial institutions are stressed by what's going on globally, but by and large, they're in a lot better shape, safer and sounder than the nation and the world as a whole.
Is that because they weren't taking a lot of they have more capital on hand and they were not putting money in these investments that, God help me, no one can understand, credit default swaps and what the hedge funds are doing? Is that the reason they've been generally safer?
I think so. Pennsylvanians are by nature, I think, a little bit more conservative than the run. At times it's cost us on the upside. There have been times when the risk takers have made a lot of money and we've missed that a little bit. But in times like these, we're a little safer still, and that's good.
Yeah. And the same can be said for the credit unions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the credit unions weren't allowed to invest in the kinds of investments that really are plaguing the mega banks, if you will. And frankly, from the credit union's perspective, this is a time for credit unions to shine, to help people when maybe the economy's not so good.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Financial Literacy Month. It's a big month. You've come on over the years, and we sort of chatted about it. What is the relationship between your office and this month? Are you helping to promote it? Go ahead.
Absolutely, we're helping to promote it. The governor signed a proclamation declaring this Financial Education Month in Pennsylvania, and it's part of an effort that started really when the governor took office in 2003. He has always believed, as I believe, that financial education is a key to families and households in Pennsylvania maintaining their safety in the current environment in which we live. People need to know a little bit about credit, about saving, about how to react to commercials that they see on television and on the radio, and in order to be secure in their homes. Physical safety is one thing, but financial safety is crucial.
Yeah, Mike, one of the things that we've tried to stress over and over again is you just somehow can't get, like, Scotty, beam me down when I'm 50 to get involved in this. This is something that has to start when?
Oh, it's lifelong. It's lifelong. It begins as early as kindergarten with wants and needs. There's curricula that start at kindergarten and go through senior citizens and how to finance your last days.
And you have programs geared to the schools as well that we've talked about.
Oh, yeah. We're very engaged.
And they're expanding.
Yeah. In fact, through the Department of Banking and other interested parties, we formed a number of partnerships where we go into various schools. We were talking off camera. Right now, Pennsylvania has 22 in-school branches. Right. And we're in 126 of the 501 school districts. There's a credit union doing some type of financial education.
You know, one of the things that's sort of fascinating as a professor, I'd go into the student union or whatever, particularly at the beginning of a school, and I'd see one booth after another sign up and get a credit card.
Oh. If there's one thing that people in the General Assembly say to me if we meet on the street or I go to visit them in their offices, they're worried about the phenomenon of their constituents having kids, 17, 18, 19 years old. When they get to the college campus, the very first thing they see is a table selling credit cards, and they give you a free baseball or they give you a free
Yep.
T-shirt if you sign up for a credit card. And if these kids are not armed to understand what the obligations associated with a credit card are, they're going to be in a world of trouble. And that's why it's so crucial, as we were saying, kindergarten through 12th grade. We have to integrate these concepts into the whole process.
All right, we'll be back. We're going to take time, pay a few bills. We'll be back. Oh, bills, Secretary of Banking, we'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. It's Financial Literacy Month, and we're doing an update. Mr. Secretary, let's talk about something about integrating financial education into the larger curriculum. In fact, maybe into life in general. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's crucial. And I want to draw a contrast between the way people traditionally thought about financial education and the way we've come to think about it today. In the past, financial education was taught like a fireman would come to a 4th grade class and say, stop, drop, and roll, and that would be once a year for 1 hour, and then leave. You can't teach financial education that way. You have to start when they're in kindergarten or in 1st grade. There's a whole series in the Berenstain Bears, for example, for very young kids, talking about what money is and how to save and all that kind of thing. And by the time they get to junior high school, you can start talking about budgeting. And by the time they're in high school, you can talk about investments and mortgages and credit and what credit means. And you really have to do it that way if you hope to be effective and really arm people to deal with life.
Yeah, Mike, one of the things that we talked about, and it's pretty important to re-emphasize, is the number of sort of instruments and it's so complex. I mean, what is it that people can, it has to be over the long period of time? You're not going to...
Well, sure. It's building blocks, as the Secretary said. I mean, you have to start with a foundation that begins very early on, understanding what money is, what money does, how money can work for you, how credit can work for you, how credit can work against you. Credit in and of itself is not necessarily bad.
That's right.
It's how you use it.
All right, you get the last word. Hey, thanks for coming on, Mr. Secretary. If you have
Always
something
fun.
you want to talk about, you come on here.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.